Hello, hello. We are back.
Hello.
All right. We are going to do a really interesting film today. A short film called Hot Stuff, another one from the National Film Board of Canada.
Yep, this one is the also in partnership with the Department of Public Works Canada, the Dominion Fire Commissioner.
Okay.
Which is kind of really exciting to me from like a PBS perspective.
Yes. And it was
Canada
fire.
style.
It was definitely fire. This one is from 71, I believe. And what was the Zlatko Gregic?
Yes, the last name Grgic, and a Croatian director. And this one had a whole bill of cast, though. Like, someone did the story, another person did the music. There were like lots of people involved in this very important piece.
Yes, a very, very mythological sort of study of mankind, but with a lot of humor in it. This was one of the funnier ones that we've seen.
Yeah,
recently.
definitely. And another short one. So this one's 9 minutes, and you can still find it on YouTube. So it's a real easy one to follow along with.
Do you want to give a brief overview of what it's about?
It's a cautionary tale about humankind's relationship with fire. I think saying less is more with this one. It really speaks for itself, and like the way that it does things so comically, and there's kind of this like evolutionary thread to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a little bit related to Adam and Eve, because I think those. I mean, I don't know if like the man's name was revealed, but he did refer to his partner as Eve.
He did, yeah.
And there was a snake in the beginning.
I loved the snake.
Yes.
Favorite character award goes to the snake. Although the cat is a close second, they were both really wonderful. They were both voiced by the same actor who apparently ad-libbed everything that the snake and the cat said, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Funny guy.
Yeah, so basically they're cave people, and they're just like really cold, and he keeps getting a cold and sneezing. And one of the things that was funny was like when he sneezes, like the actual like camera starts shaking. And so basically the gods were like, all right, we're gonna cut you a break. We're gonna warm you up. So they give him fire. But they like warn him, you need to be very careful with this. This is a big responsibility. But, they use the fire, it keeps them warm, and then they also use it to keep away predators. And basically, it sort of just like alleviates their lifestyle a little bit, and things get, it's just like another tool. And it's funny because he names it Wheel. He's like, I'm going to name this Wheel. And then we have a little sequence where the fire gets passed down throughout the generations, and we get to modern day, and we see how fire sort of gets translated into electricity, and it's just like utilized in many different ways to create our modern society. So it's like this gift from the gods, and we've used it to fuel our society. But then it starts to go haywire when we get a little bit too, I don't know, a man's hubris, so to speak, sort of gets ahead of him, and then it sort of engulfs him, much like a flame would.
Yeah, and they do this really interesting transition kind of between the opening scene with the man and the snake and the woman into showing how it progresses, and it's this like black and white torch animation where someone's carrying the torch and they're kind of evolving over time into different forms of themselves, and it said, and man progressed, and, and then it just goes.
Yeah, that was definitely one of my favorite animation sequences. It just like goes through all the periods in history, and then it finally gets to present day, and so like the ending, where it ends up is it's just like a couple, like a middle-aged couple at their house. The husband is watching TV, the wife is ironing, and then they have their cat, sort of just hanging out. And the couple, they're arguing, and she asks her husband to get something in the kitchen, and he's sort of he's just being sort of like a grumpy old man, and they're arguing. And as they're arguing, they're not really paying much attention to the appliances they're using. So for example, he lights a cigarette with a match, and he leaves the match or the cigarette lit, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And then also he starts plugging in a lot of things into the outlet, and that starts to overload
Mm-hmm.
the outlet. And then the wife goes into the kitchen, and she leaves the iron just flat on the clothing. And then this all sparks a fire, and then the whole apartment gets engulfed in flames, and then the neighborhood gets engulfed in
Mm-hmm.
flames, and then the city gets engulfed in flames, and then the earth, and then all the planets
Mm-hmm.
and everything. And uh, basically it's sort of like uh, this is kind of like the Great Flood, but if it was fire.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And the ending kind of circles back to the beginning too, where the first words that are uttered is "in the beginning all was chaos and fire," and then the last are "in the end all was chaos and fire. The gods were angry again. The next time we give the fire to the woman," which
That was a great line.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that was wonderful. Because everyone's so dismissive of any woman character throughout the whole thing, and there's this whole shtick with like the married couple at the end where he's just like basically verbally abusing her and like is just super dismissive of her, and she's just like who do like taking it and just being like, I'm kind of oblivious and I'm just gonna keep going on and doing the next thing. And yeah, and there's definitely this like God aspect to animation too, because it starts off with that kind of that Adam and Eve thing and God, and then comes back to, and the gods were angry again. One thing that I wanted to talk about was when they're in the house and you see the fire like kind of lapping at the outlet plug. They say really interesting dialogue about that. So we get to the carry the torch animation, and then after that, they said until fire could be hidden and brought to life in seconds, constantly waiting for a chance to escape. And I just think that's such like poetry, kind of talking about
Yeah.
electricity, and then like what does that mean about what is this saying about electricity? Like the gods are angry again, and there's that whole sequence with Thomas Edison, and the lights go out and you just see the eyes, and then like the
Hmm.
light bulb comes on type of thing.
It kind of reminds me of sort of like man trying to tame nature and
Mhm.
control it and use it on his own terms as opposed to nature's terms. Because what was the quote you said? It was like waiting for a chance to.
Constantly waiting for a chance to escape.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, sort of, because there was this gift that we were given, and now we're sort of. I don't know, I feel like sometimes humans are like, you give them an inch, they take a mile. And
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of like a blessing and a curse because, on the one hand, it's allowed us to progress, quote, end quote, and to do amazing things. But also, it has been a lot to our detriment,
Mm-hmm.
with how much we've harmed the environment, ourselves. So, yeah, it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, definitely. That's been a theme in several of the pieces that we've looked at throughout the podcast. So it was something people were thinking about a lot in this time, seems. Um,
But it was very funny.
mm-hmm.
One of the funny things was when the fire erupts in the apartment. So the husband, he starts throwing water, like pails of water, and then the wife comes over and she starts like spraying perfume, and I thought that was just kind of a
Mm-hmm.
funny little gag.
Yeah.
And then this one killed me. So there's this one line from the cat, who I'm thinking the cat might have been sort of like the snake, like an
Mm-hmm.
evolution of the snake,
Yeah.
because they were both purple
Uh-huh.
and they were voiced by the same person.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so it sort of seemed like there was
And they're both like highly ignored characters as
yes.
well.
But also they have a lot of one-liners.
Mm-hmm.
And my favorite one-liner is, so this is when the apartment is in flames, and then the cat goes up to the flames and says, "I guess I'll wait for a mouse flambeau."
I thought of you when he said
Oh my god.
that.
So I immediately thought, so there's this Rick and Morty episode. Basically there is a scene with Johnny Carson, and then there's this guy who's supposedly impervious to acid. And so he's going to be lowered into a vat of acid on live television. But it turns out that he is not impervious to acid.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously the guy gets lowered into the acid, and he gets burned alive.
Uh-huh.
And then he says it looks like it's going to be acid flambe or something or something like that. And it was like a very, very funny joke. And I did some research. So flambe was a very popular technique in the 70s, like
Huh.
the 60s and 70s. So flambe is a cooking technique where you add alcohol to food and then you set it on fire and it burns off the alcohol, but it like adds a bit of the flavor to the food.
Mm.
Crepe Suzette, Steak Diane. There are other Baked Alaska. I
Yeah,
believe
that's
does.
what I was
Yeah.
thinking.
So apparently in the 70s it was like very hip. It was sort of like very like forward, like this like really cool thing to go out to a restaurant and they do flambe. So to watch this and when he says mouse flambeau, and then it reminded me of that. So I thought it was like a very of the period. So it's fun watching content,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're like, "Oh, there it is. There's the reference. There's a
Yeah.
reference." And then another funny 70s reference was when they showed when they were showing the progression of fire into electricity. They had all of these guys playing electric guitars,
Mm-hmm.
and like it's so funny because the archetype of like a rocker has not like changed at all like
Mm-hmm.
it since its inception. Like they were wearing these really flared jeans. They had this moppy hair, and they were just kind of like waddling around with their guitars, and it was just like really funny to see
Yeah.
that sort of like stereotype archetype of like rock and roll like guitar players still like that and of the time. And like even at that time people sort of were kind of poking fun at it.
Yeah.
um the animation was interesting, and I think
Mm.
something finally clicked when I was watching it. I've noticed that a lot of animation of this period looks a lot like comics from the period as well.
Oh, yeah.
So like if you look at a comic, any like sort of comic from that period, it almost is the animation almost looks like it's just an animation of the comic. And I don't know if you could say the same about animation today, because I feel like animation today has a very distinct look from the way comics and newspapers look.
Yeah, just I mean, things being so heavily influenced by print media then versus now it's everything so digital and yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so attracted to 70s
Mm.
animation, because I felt like I was just watching, because it just reminds me so much of all of like the still comics
Mm.
of the era. I mean, especially like their noses, their giant
Oh, the noses. I
noses.
wanted to ask you, like, who
Yeah.
does that remind you of? Because even that they were like pulsing or like they were like moving a whole bunch when they talked too.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've seen these noses somewhere, and I was thinking Autumn will know, but
I'm sure I'll remember as
yeah.
soon as we finish wrapping this up. But yeah, like the noses and just like the scraggly lines, and it
Hmm.
just looked so. It just reminded me a lot of like even like a lot of the political cartoons of
Hmm.
the era.
Hmm.
And I think I guess you're right with like the print media having a big influence as opposed to the other like digital formats. And I don't know, it's just kind of cool to see like how similar they are, and just relying on the personality of of the characters and how they're drawn. I really like the cat's design. I think they were my favorite character because
Yeah.
they had this really. There's something about the era. Everything is just so like funky looking.
Yeah,
Like,
the spotted tail
oh my god,
yeah, and the
yeah,
face. And I think it starts with the cat being like, "Where's the cream? Where's the cream?" And it's like the way that the cat follows him all around too. I was like, whoever like designed and voiced this cat had a cat. Like that's like what, and they get into stuff and they're like,
yeah.
constantly asking for things and you don't really know what they're asking for.
And it didn't like it didn't like entirely look like a cat, but
Right.
it had this. I don't know. It was just like I want to compare it a little bit to the Cheshire Cat, but it had this. I don't know, je ne sais quoi. It just had
It
this
did.
really like funky kind of like silly, fun. I don't know. It was a very likable
Yeah.
character. Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely kind of am obsessed with your theory that it's the snake evolved.
Yeah.
So,
I also liked there was a few sequences that I thought were almost gave me ASMR almost. The when he cuts the bread and puts it into the toaster, there was something about like the smoothness and the
huh.
way he like cut it and put it into the toaster. It I don't know.
Yeah, I felt that way, like almost visual ASMR with the fire that was like the iron and the oven. It was like this sequence after the torch animation, and it was like the way that the red was and the way that it just looked so like, oh, it like gave me shivers almost.
Yeah, the images and just like the voices, the voice actors had this. It's funny because like they will be using slang and making like jokes, but they also have this kind of like, what's the word? They were coming out of a very sort of proper period in
Mm,
time, and so you still hear some of that affectation in their
mm.
voices. So even though it's like a cartoon and it's kind of they're being silly, it still has a kind of like I don't know, just like that mid-century prestige dialect
Yeah.
that's really kind of
But the way that that interacts with the slang
with the
too.
slang.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I get you. I understand.
Well, that was hot stuff. It sure was hot.
Yeah, this is really one of my favorite ones that we've watched. So definitely watch it.
Yeah, I'm gonna rewatch it again. Like it was really really entertaining. All right, join us next time for another episode of 70s Daydreams. Take care.
Bye bye.